very old and very unsteady under here. Okay. Gee, but it's good to be here. Frankly, I feel right at home. There's nothing like this stuff anywhere. There's a magic that's in the air. Gee, but it's good to be here. Wouldn't miss this for the world. It's my considered opinion that the place to be is the place I'm at, and I couldn't be more sincere. Gee, but it's good to be here. It's more than good to be here, it's great to be here. And to have at the piano my friend Jonathan Williams. This place brings back so many happy memories for me, like this. London, Paris, Cricklewood, New York are all the same to me. Just a refugee from Hampstead, NW3. Nassau, Rio, Dio mio, wherever I may roam, at every aerodrome, my thoughts fly right back home. A small abode off the Finchley Road, you know the kind I mean. A pied-à-terre between Berkeley Square and a flat in Wilson Green. Satinwood in the bedroom, groaning with odds and ends. Our sitting room was a dead room, as we only used it for friends. But I was taught to avoid all sport and appreciate good cuisine. In our small abode off the Finchley Road on the way to Golders Green. A small abode off the Finchley Road, you know the kind I mean. An Irby in Russ on the 13 bus and the long waits in between. A garden with privet hedges, geranium and marguerite, lobelia round the edges, like everyone else on the street. At night we'd sup with the blinds drawn up, 'cause we all like to be seen. In our small abode off the Finchley Road on the way to Golders Green. Beverly Hills, Bermuda, Biarritz or Bournemouth, you don't mean a thing. Of thee I do not sing. To Hampstead faithfully I cling. I think Florida couldn't be horrider. Though it's a la mode, and I wish Park Avenue showed me a glimpse of Avenue Road. A small abode off the Finchley Road, you know the kind I mean. I can see Papa with his big cigar and Mama in velveteen. Walks to the zoo on Sundays, sweets in a silver dish. The wash done at home on Mondays, and on Fridays we fried the fish. I was smartly dressed, living off the best, and never touched margarine. In our small abode off the Finchley Road on the way to Golders Green. A small abode off the Finchley Road, you know the kind I mean. I left the place in intense disgrace at the age of 17. I married a boy from Brondesbury. But soon I became aware he wasn't too fond of Brondesbury, and we now live in Eaton Square. An outcast I, till the day I die, and I'm carried all serene to a small abode off the Finchley Road on the way to Golders Green. It's lovely being back here. I did 4 productions here, and in my day I could stand on a stage and face you all, but today I've got you all round me. I was in 4 productions here, and the one that I'm going to sing a song from now, well, I'll tell you about it afterwards. Am I going to sing a song about it?
No, I don't think so.
That was the song.
Yes, that was.
That was the song. Sorry, I am a very old lady. Yes, that song was from a show called Spread a Little Happiness. It was devised and compared by Sheridan Morley, and it was written by Vivian Ellis. He was a very old man at the time, but he came here every day for rehearsal, and he was so happy that I sang that song. He'd written it for Hermione Gingold, but she'd never performed it. I think I'm the only one who ever did. I have a book that's been published. It's called Double or Nothing, and it's the joint autobiography of myself and my late husband, Peter Fry. In it, we examine the paths that both of us took until we met and married late in life. How were we similar? How were we different? For instance, we were both Jewish, but I was brought up in a traditional religious home. Peter's father was anti-religious. As a boy of 11, he got caught up in that abortive uprising in Russia in 1905, and it was put down so viciously his parents were frightened for him and sent him to America alone, where he remained, as in his turn did his son, my Peter, dedicated socialists for their lives, believing with Marx that religion is the opiate of the masses. I'm a Yorkshire lass. My parents were called Ruby and Louis Wigoder. I was born in Leeds, as was my mother, but my father was born in Lithuania, and because of the anti-Semitism and the pogroms, he was carried out at the age of 3 months and taken to Dublin, where he grew up and qualified in 1914 as a dentist, and he went to live in Leeds. He met my mother, who was a 13-year-old schoolgirl at the time, and they were engaged when she was 17 and married when she was 19, and they had 58 happy years together, not 58 children. Mother was 10 years younger than Dad, but she died first. And one day when Daddy was a very old man, he said to me, he never lost his Irish accent, he said to me, "Thelma, do you know why you've always had such good health?" I said, "No, Daddy, why?" He says, "'Cause your mother's the only woman I ever made love to in my entire life." So if it's not too late, you know how to have healthy children. Mother was beautiful and very talented. She had charm and vivacity and the glorious lyric soprano singing voice. My first memories of going to the theatre were to see my beautiful mother in such shows as The Vagabond King and No No Nanette and Rose Marie and Madame Pompadour and Noel Coward's Bittersweet. She'd been a child performer. She'd taken her first 2 names as her stage name, Paula Ruby. And I have at home 2 bills on the wall from the Morecambe Pier in 1911 when Mother was 10. And she's billed as Dainty Little Paula Ruby, a real juvenile star. Here are 2 of Mother's childhood songs. Over the ocean, somewhere in Japan, sweet little Yosan loved a sailor man. Sad was her daydream, tearful was her eye, when that little sailor man, he came to say goodbye. Emperor had commanded he must join his ship War was spreading far and wide, so to his lady love he sighed. Farewell, my little Yosan, farewell, my sweetheart true. Over the mighty ocean, I've a duty there to do. Sometimes will you remember Toki, your sailor man, who is going out to fight for the cause of the right and the freedom of dear Japan. All along the garden where the moonbeams glance, music echoes loud and clear. Girls have got their partners for the joyous dance, but the one I want's not here. There are partners made in Germany and gentlemen from France. There are boys who come from England, but they haven't got a chance with a Tony from America over the sea. He guessed I was all alone, and that's why he came along and found me over in America. Someday we'll be where the cottage we have rented. We'll be quite contented, Tony and me. The first of those songs was published in 1904 when Mother was 3, and I wouldn't be surprised if she sang it about then, because I do have a photo of her at the age of 4 winning a prize on the sands at Blackpool in a place called Carlton's Cosy Corner, and she's holding out an accordion pleated skirt. And then she grew up, and after my brother and I were born, she came to London for a year to appear in another Noel Coward show called This Year of Grace. It was produced by the famous C.B. Cochran. Our room with our view and you, and no one to worry us, no one to hurry us through this dream we found. We'll gaze at the sky and try to guess what it's all about. Then we will figure out why the world is round. We'll be as happy and contented as birds upon a tree, high above the mountains and sea. We'll bill and we'll coo, ooh, and sorrow will never come. Oh, will it ever come true? A room with a view. It was my childhood ambition to be an actress, but it was a secret ambition because, believe it or not, as a child I was painfully shy. And I think if the war hadn't come along, I don't think I would have been an actress. I'd have done what my parents wanted for me, which would be to marry a nice Jewish doctor or lawyer from Leeds. Maybe even from Manchester. But the war did come along, and Mother and I were evacuated to New York for 4 years. And I was very lucky to win a scholarship to a college there called Finch. And when I was being interviewed, I was asked, what subject would you like to major in? And I said, well, my father thinks I could be a writer, but I'd like to be an actress. actress. It was the first time I said it out loud. And she said, we have a fine theatre arts department here. And they did. I learned not only about acting, I learned how to make scenery, how to run a lighting board, how to do sound effects. We used to go to Broadway shows and learn about criticism and theatre history. It was an all-girls college, and when we did productions, they bring in professionals to play the men's parts. And there was a lady running the department that I adored. I think maybe we've all had someone in our teenage years we feel influenced us for the rest of our lives, and she was that for me. I used to come out of our classes flying. Then in October 1944, Mother and I came back, and although I was still a teenager, I was liable to be called up. The war was still on. I didn't want to go to a factory, I didn't want to go into uniform. I really wanted to use my newly honed skills. So Mother and I came down from Leeds to London and went to Drury Lane Theatre, which was the headquarters of ENSA, which was entertainment for the troops. And we stood at the side of the stage watching auditions, and there was a white-haired lady playing a violin, and there was a rather portly, bald-headed man singing, "All things come home at eventide." I thought I must be able to do better than that. So the show Oklahoma had opened in America, but it hadn't come here yet. So I marched on and sang a song from that show in my most raucous voice. I can't say no. And I saw them waking up down in the stalls. I saw them taking their feet off the seats in front of them. When I'd finished, a man came running on the stage and said, "Oh, you're just what I'm looking for a show that starts rehearsing next week. Come into my office." The dressing rooms at Drury Lane were the offices. So Mother and I went into his office, and he said to me, "What's your name?" I said, "Thelma Wiggader." He said, "You can't go on the stage with a name like that." Nobody would be able to spell it, nobody would be able to pronounce it. I hadn't really thought of it as a stage name. I quite fancied Thelma Leeds. But Mother spoke up in her beautiful voice and said, "Well, my stage name was Paula Ruby." He said, "Thelma Ruby, fine. Be at rehearsal on Monday." And that's how I became Thelma Ruby. And I'm still Thelma Ruby, 72 years later. And I'm glad. I love having Mother's voice. Mother's name, I mean. We were a concert party, 6 of us, including the pianist. And I was what was called the soubrette, the young person who sings comedy songs, like this. I can't stop talking about him and talking about him and talking about him. I can't stop talking about him, the man that I adore. Can't stop talking about him and talking about him and talking about him. Can't stop talking about him, though I seem a bore. Can't stop telling about him, yelling about him, telling about him. Can't stop hovering over the moment that we met. He wore a pinstripe. What do you call it? A beautiful smile, a barrel of money. Can't stop talking about him yet. He kissed me and a bell went boing. A whistle went woo. A trapdoor opened and I flipped right through. Can't stop talking about him, talking about him, talking about him. And if he was yours, well, neither would you. I was in the hospitals division, and we went all over the country to hospitals. Sometimes they were on airfields or army camps. Quite often they were in stately homes which have been turned into convalescent homes for the war, like you saw in Downton Abbey. And I grew up very quickly. There was one whole audience of boys who'd been blinded. There was another audience of boys who'd lost limbs, and across the front there were couches onto which they lifted the boys who'd lost all 4 limbs. And one of the most difficult sights was on VE Day, May the 8th, 1945. There was a famous surgeon during the war called Archibald Mackinder, and he did wonderful work on the boys who'd been shot down in flames, and he had to do a lot of operations on them, and this was the place they went to between operations. And there were boys with no faces, no noses, no ears, no hands, but what an audience, VE night, how they laughed, how they cheered. And afterwards in the bar, I remember there was a boy next to me with no hands, and he put his stump into his beer mug, and with the rest of us, he lifted it, We were drinking to peace. We were stationed in Chichester, and in order to get back there, we had to drive through Portsmouth. And after 5 years of blackout, they had floodlit the Fleet. And when we stopped our minibus to look at it, I was next to the window, and the window was down, and a policeman put his head in the window and says, "Do you know what I'd do now?" I said, "No, what?" He says, "I'd send the Jews over to Germany, and I'd make every German have a blood transfusion from a Jew, so they know what it's like to have Jewish blood." And when I got back to Chichester, it was so late, everybody had left the streets, but they'd floodlit the cathedral and the cross in the middle of the town. I've called my show That's Entertainment, which probably brings back memories of that lovely song, That's Entertainment. But just for a few minutes, I want to address that title more seriously. I want to ask, what's entertainment? I want to question the notion I hear when people say, "I don't go to the theatre to be educated, I just want to be entertained." Well, I've done every branch of theatre in my career, and I'm never satisfied unless what I do is more than just entertainment. The theatre is a great art form with a strong potential to influence an audience. Something should happen to you in an audience, either through tears or laughter or empathy or illumination or fear or anger. You should be changed by what you see, learn something, or feel that great catharsis of, "Oh, that's just how I felt," or "That's just what happened to me." Your heart jumps when you say, "Oh, that's just how I felt, but I could never have expressed it as well or understood it as deeply." It's what's called the shock of recognition. I don't go to the theatre for entertainment, though I'm frequently entertained there. But then I'm entertained if I'm taken out for a meal. I'm entertained if I hear a good joke. But I want more in the theatre. I want to know more, I want to feel more, I want to understand more. In my head, in my heart, in my stomach, in my womb, in every part of me. I want to know more, I want to feel more, I want to understand more, because it's so miraculous, so marvellous, this thing called life. And where can I see it crystallised, sharply in focus? Nowhere as in the theatre, with three-dimensional actors in front of you, giving a performance they've never given before and they'll never give again in exactly the same way. The theatre is for the full enjoyment of life. My feeling about theatre at its best is moralistic. I think it's a moral institution. I may be in the minority, but I think theatre is educational. I think all art is didactic. And when I say theatre at its best, I don't only mean serious drama. I've told you I've done a lot of comedies and musicals in the days when I could really sing. 4 times I played Golda, the mother, in the show Fiddler on the Roof. 3 times with Topple. And it's my contention that in any category, that's one of the finest creations of the last century. It has everything we ask. It has wonderful songs, dances, story, thanks to Shalom Aleichem. And because it's particular, because it takes place in a little village, a little shtetl in Russia at the beginning of the last century, it's become universal. Here are 2 songs from Fiddler. In the first one, the mother is watching her daughter being married under the canopy. In the second, she has just lit the Sabbath candles and she's blessing her 5 daughters. Is this the little girl I carried? Is this the little boy at play? I don't remember growing older. When did they? When did she get to be a beauty? When did he grow to be so tall? Wasn't it yesterday when they were small? Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days. Seedlings turn overnight to sunflowers blossoming even as we gaze. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. May the Lord protect and defend you. May the Lord preserve you from shame. May you come to be in Israel a shining name. May you be like Ruth and like Esther. May you be deserving of praise. Strengthen them, O Lord, and keep them from the stranger's ways. May God bless you and grant you long lives and fulfill our Sabbath prayer for you. May God make you good mothers and wives and send you husbands who will care for you. May the Lord protect and defend you. May the Lord preserve you from pain. Favor them, O Lord, with happiness and peace. Oh, hear our Sabbath prayer. I must tell you what happened to me in Japan. Peter and I were in Tokyo, and we were in a theatre, and we'd been given an introduction to a front of house manager. And he came to talk to us in the interval, and he said, at the moment we're rehearsing for the 36th revival of Fiddler on the Roof. 36th revival? I said, how can it be the 36th revival? He said, well, here, we run a show for a month. If it's successful, we just keep reviving it. And I said, oh, I'd love to come to rehearsal because I've played Golda the Mother. He said, all right, come tomorrow. Well, when we arrived, we were met by an interpreter and a photographer and taken into this beautiful rehearsal room in the theatre, huge cast, and given a welcome, and we sat down to watch the rehearsal of Fiddler on the Roof in Japanese with the Japanese cast. Well, they were so good, they were so dedicated. Peter and I found it very moving. And when we started to get up, I said, wait a minute, I've just had an idea. I'd like to sing the song Do You Love Me with the Japanese Tevi. And they, oh, yes! I must tell you that the Japanese Golda was a sweet, quiet little Japanese wifey. So he starts off in Japanese, oh, hey, stay, Lou. And I went, do I what? He went, and he sang the whole thing in terror. Oh, how they laughed. And as we were going through the door, the Tevye came over and said, through the interpreter, he said, it's so interesting to me that this show goes so well in the West. It's so Japanese. When I did the last scene in that show, I always used to weep real tears, not theatre tears. We have to leave Anatevka because of the anti-Semitism and the pogroms, and my daughter's Seitel is carrying a baby. And that baby, to me, was my dad being carried out of Lithuania back in 1892. But, to get back to me. Right. 3 years had passed since I'd left drama school, and I hadn't created a part. I hadn't acted. I hadn't really done. I'd done Ensa. I'd been on tour with Evelyn Leigh, a part with one line. I'd been an extra in a film. I'd done all sorts of bits and pieces, but I hadn't really acted. And my first chance came when I was cast as leading lady in a repertory company, Harry Hanson's Court Players. Do I hear someone who remembers him? It was twice nightly, weekly rep. I'll tell you how it worked. Tuesday we would read through the play and set the first act. We'd do our 2 shows, and then that evening we had to learn the lines of the first act. Often it meant staying up all night. Wednesday was the second act. Thursday was the third act. All the plays in those days had 3 acts. Friday was a run-through. Saturday was a run-through. Sunday we had the day off. Monday we did a dress rehearsal during the day and then opened with 2 shows. Well, it was good and it was bad. It was good because it certainly taught you to learn quickly, and it also taught you to jump in and improvise when things go wrong, which they often did. But it was bad because in the theatre you need time to create a character. It should be from the inside, not just slapped on. Although I shared a dressing room with an elderly character actress who said, "Thelma, you don't have to worry, you've only got 3 performances. Just look at the script and say, is it number 1 out the bag, number 2 out the bag, number 3 out the bag." We often had scripts that were called sides, which was just our lines with a few words of the cue. But then things got better, and I had some very nice jobs. I was even in the West End, but I wouldn't sing after Ensa because my mother had this lovely voice and I didn't want to be compared with her. And in my late 20s, I was at a party and I met a lady, I remember her name, Betty Alvarez. And she said to me, "Do you sing?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, listening to you speak, I feel sure there's a singing voice in there. I happen to be a coach accompanist. Come to me and let's try." She started me singing. She found me an agent who got me my very first singing job, which was to play Prince Charming in the pantomime Cinderella in Hull. And I loved it. Beautiful costumes, a chance to show my legs. Now, a very extraordinary thing happened to me now, about 3 weeks ago. This pantomime, I've worked out, is 65 years ago. I had an email from a lady in Yorkshire who said, "I was one of your babes," because in those days, every pantomime had a babes chorus, which was the local dancing school, a children's chorus called the Babes. And in Hull it was Miss Pickles' Babes. And she said, "I was one of Miss Pickles' babes." And then I had another email from her, said, "I'm coming down from Yorkshire on July 24th to see your show. So somewhere here is my babe. Will you stand up? You're here." There she is. The first entrance in that show, 65 years ago, I came into the forest. I'd been hunting as Prince Charming. Cinders is collecting firewood. I wore a costume for that first entrance, boots up to here, everything in white and royal blue, a tree-corn hat with a royal blue feather, and I come in singing this song. It's a great life if you don't weaken, and you won't weaken if you smile. When you're feeling NBG, try an SMILE. You won't have room for depression or gloom when a smile gets round your dial. It's a great life if you don't weaken, and you won't weaken if you smile. On come the babes. It's a great life. You remember? Shakespeare. I've only been in Shakespeare 3 times in my career. Once was right here at the King's Head when I played the nurse in Romeo and Juliet. And I loved it. I felt Shakespeare had written it especially for me. I played Goneril in King Lear, directed by Jonathan Miller, and our Lear was Michael Hordern. And Jonathan was a wonderful director. He gave you just those words you need for what I was talking about before, creating the character, inhabiting the character. He said to me about Goneril, "You hate having your father and his followers coming to live with you. You've just scrubbed the floor in the entrance hall. In he comes with his muddy boots. All his followers have muddy boots and they're dragging a bloody stag. And you've got a list on the fridge in the kitchen of all the things you have to do today." Just the words you need to give you an idea of the character. But my first Shakespeare was when I played Mistress Quickly to the Falstaff of Orson Welles. Orson had gone round Ireland as a boy, as a young boy, I think on a donkey. He'd ended up in Dublin, and his first chance to be on any stage was given him by Hilton Edwards and Michael McLearmore at their famous Gate Theatre. And as a thank you for that, every few years he would go back and appear in Dublin. And this was one of those occasions. He'd put together both parts of Henry IV and called it Chimes at Midnight, with himself as Falstaff in the leading part. The plan was that we had 3 weeks rehearsal in London, we were to open in Belfast and then do the season in Dublin. So we go to the first rehearsal, my first Shakespeare, and for some reason I have never discovered from then till now, after the first reading, Orson disappeared. Whether he had another job, whether he was ill, I've no idea. Now, Hilton Edwards was the director, so for 2 weeks, without Orson Welles, you move here, you sit there. Then, at the beginning of the 3rd week, Orson Welles came back, and nothing that Hilton had planned suited him. Okay, you can adjust to that. What we couldn't adjust to was he didn't know a word. He was still stumbling around with the book in his hand, and that's how it was all week. We got the train to Belfast. He had a compartment to himself to learn his words. The theatre in Belfast, we were opening on the Monday. We had to wait for the present show to get out on the Saturday night. So we were called late on the Saturday night, and they said, "We'll have a costume parade." So we put on our costumes, but not Orson. He'd taken over the direction of the whole show, and he was sitting out in the stalls. And they said, "Okay, we'll put up the set and do the lighting tonight. Come tomorrow for a technical rehearsal." Technical rehearsal means just entrances and exits and scene changes and light changes, just the technical side of the show. And so we arrived next morning, and it was the coldest day of the year, and the heating had broken down. We rehearsed all the Sunday, all the evening, all night, until 8 o'clock Monday morning. And we'd never done a run-through, we'd never seen Orson in costume, we'd never seen him without the book. And we're supposed to open that night. So I thought, surely they'll call us back for a dress rehearsal this afternoon. But they said, "No, you'll come back for the opening night." And I thought, well, it's my first Shakespeare. I know how to jump in and improvise when things go wrong, but how do you make up a line of Shakespeare suddenly in the middle? I'm standing waiting to go on, and I look next to me, and there's a complete stranger standing there. Orson had got on a bald wig with bits of hair sticking out, a false nose, false eyebrows, bright red cheeks. He was a big man. He padded himself to twice the size, totally unrecognizable. He was very naughty, because he went on and he was brilliant. The rest of us were in a state of collapse. There's a scene in the play where Falstaff's servant, I remember it was played by an actor called Henry Wolfe, has to go to the side of the stage and say, "Here comes the Lord Chief Justice." And the Lord Chief Justice is supposed to come on. Well, the Lord Chief Justice was played by an elderly actor who was in such a state of collapse, I don't think he even knew what the play was or what the theatre was. He was still up in his dressing room. So again, Henry says, "Here comes the Lord Chief Justice." Nothing. Orson sitting at the front of the stage. Henry goes and sits next to him and says, "I said he cometh, but he cometh not." Television. I've been in television since the very earliest days. when it was all live from Alexandra Palace. And I was in a production of Cranford, which was done again not so long ago. But later on, I did a series called Bluebell, which was a true story, and I played a real person, a French performer by the name of Miss Tanguette. Miss Tanguette kept performing until she was a very old lady, and she was so proud of her legs that she had them separately insured. And this is a song of Miss Tanguette in which she's a streetwalker looking for a millionaire. Je cherche un millionnaire, un type chic qui voudrait bien de moi au moins une fois par mois. Je cherche un millionnaire qui me dirait froidement tout ce que j'ai, c'est à toi. Je cherche un millionnaire pour avoir des choses comme les stars, pour manger des homards. Un millionnaire. C'est pour ça que je fais le boulevard. C'est facile d'être chic quand on a beaucoup de fric, quelques mots effacés. Quand on est argenté et qu'on n'a plus rien à demander, je cherche un millionnaire. Car je sais que ces oiseaux rares veulent placer le dollar. Je cherche un millionnaire. C'est pour ça que je fais le boulevard. C'est pour ça que je fais le boulevard. Shall I keep that in next week? The best time of my career was when I was in musicals and revue. And people often ask me, what's your favourite part in your career? I can't answer that. I think I've loved everything. But if I had to answer, I think I would say Fraulein Schneider in the musical Cabaret, which I was lucky enough to co-star with Judi Dench at the Palace Theatre. And Judy was the best partner you could ever have. There was one scene where I had a long speech to the audience and then a long song, and I'm facing the audience and she's facing me, and I'm the only one to see her face. And 8 shows a week she was weeping and her face was suffused in sympathy. One mark of great acting, I think, is if you know how to listen. 2 songs about marriage. The first one is from Cabaret, and in it I was a frankly middle-aged lady who'd given up all ideas of romance, and then the miracle happens and she becomes engaged. The second one is from a show called Taking My Turn, and this lady's been married for a very long time. How the world can change, it can change like that, due to one little word, married. See a palace rise from a 2-room flat, due to one little word, married. And the old despair that was often there suddenly ceases to be. For you wake one day, look around and say, somebody wonderful married me. Through all the years we've been together, through all the times we've said goodbye, through all the storms we've had to weather, We have been lovers, you and I. And now when time starts running out, we see what love is all about. I look at you, my love, and it still isn't over. In spite of all that we've been through, I'm glad I live my life with you. You know it's true, my love, it still isn't over. How glad I am I live my life with you. I was in a musical written by Cole Porter in 1952, and it's called Out of This World, and it's the story of Jupiter and Juno living on Mount Olympus, and Jupiter's always going down to Earth and chasing pretty girls, and this is Juno's lament. The breeze is chasing the zephyr, the moon is chasing the sea, the bull is chasing the heifer, but nobody's chasing me. The cock is chasing the chicken, the pee-wee, some wee pee-wee, the cat is taking a licking, but nobody's taking me. Nobody wants to own me, and I object. Nobody wants to phone me, even collect. Leopard chases the leopard, the chimp, some chimpanzee. The sheep is chasing the shepherd, but nobody's chasing me. Nobody's chasing me. The flood is chasing the levee, the wolf is out on the spree, the Ford is chasing the Chevy, but nobody's chasing me. The bee is chasing Hymettus, the queen is chasing the bee, the worm is chasing the lettuce, but nobody me. Each night I get the mirror from off the shelf. Each night I'm getting queerer, chasing myself. The is chasing the goosey. The aphid chases the pea. The gander's chasing the goosey. But nobody's goosing me. Nobody's chasing me. The llama chases the llama. Papa is chasing Mama. Monsieur is chasing Madama. But nobody's chasing moi. The dove each moment is bolder. The lark sings Ich liebe dich. Tristan is chasing Isolde, but nobody's chasing mich. Although I may be Juno, believe it or not, I got a lot of you know, and you know what? The snake with passion is shaking. The pooch is chasing the flea. The moose his love call is making, but nobody's making me. Nobody. did quite a lot of review, and it was called Intimate Review. It's out of favour now, but it used to be very popular. In fact, exactly 60 years ago, I was in a review at the Apollo on Shaftesbury Avenue for 2 years that was called For Amusement Only. It was a mixture of songs and dances and sketches. I want to do a sketch from review. For this sketch, I need a man, and I've been extremely lucky to acquire the services of Mr. Jonathan Williams. The scene is a cocktail bar at about 5 o'clock in the evening. Peter Parsons! As I live and breathe, well, fancy seeing you. You remember me, of course. I'm Sally Hughes. It must be 10 years since we met, but you haven't changed, my pet. Come on, sit down and tell me all your news. Oh, Peter, you just couldn't be looking sweeter. You're keeping fit? Well, obviously you are. How long are you in town? Don't you think I'm looking brown? I've been to Monte Carlo in the car. Have you ever been to Monte? Isn't it sweet? I went with Auntie. You remember Auntie May? Wasn't she a yell? She's the one you used to say, look just like your dapple grey. By the way, what happened to that horse, dear?
Well...
Remember that last ride, dear? You got that lovely idea, and I got home with my jumpers soaked in dew. Oh, wasn't Mummy furious? Yes, you know, it's curious. I've never felt ashamed of it, have you? Well, really, there's no need to. I've just never paid much heed to the conventions or the penalties incurred. So you mustn't say you're sorry for that evening in the quarry. No, please, my dear, don't say another word. Oh, Peter, isn't it marvellous to meet a childhood sweetheart, don't you think? Of course you do. Remember when we parted, weren't you simply broken-hearted? Well, of course you were, my dear, me too. Remember telling Mother we were made for one another? She didn't believe us, did she? But it's true. And you're still my favourite flame. I don't suppose you feel the same. Or do you? Oh, Peter dear, you do! So that was why you tarried. You mean you never married? Oh, Peter, darling Peter, nor did I. I just saved myself for you, dear. I felt I wanted to, dear. Oh, Peter, darling Peter, please don't cry. No more need for tears and sorrow, dear. I'll marry you tomorrow. Is that all right? No? Say the 23rd. Oh, Peter, please don't thank me. Just let me find my hanky. No, please, my dear, don't say another word. Oh, Peter, my life couldn't be completer. Let's start making plans, dear, right away. Do you want a quiet wedding? I must see about some bedding. Or should we stay a while with Auntie May? No, straight after the marriage we can catch a train to Harwich, and we'll stay with Mummy for a month or two. What do you mean to look like that? Mummy's got a lovely flat. And I'm sure she's always most polite to you. Very different from your mother and your nasty little brother. You've got very little room to scorn and scoff. I won't sit here like a dummy while you insult poor Mummy. If you feel that, we'd better call it off. Oh, I'm glad you spoke your mind out. And I'm very glad to find out how you felt before the wedding day occurred. And to think you nearly lured me into marriage. Well, that's cured me. No, please, my dear, don't say another word. I think we'd better say goodbye. What's this, your card? But why? Mr. Jonathan Williams? But that's absurd. Do you mean you're not Peter? Well, you might have been discreeter. Oh, that's the most ill-mannered thing I ever heard. How could you sit there and just never say a word? Poor Jonathan, he spent 3 weeks learning his lines. And now it's my great pleasure to hand you over to Mr. Jonathan Williams.
Thank you. As well as playing the piano, I occasionally like to turn my hand to a little bit of songwriting. And this next song is not by me, I hasten to add, but by a very talented Broadway composer called Alan Chapman. But it's a song about what it feels like to be a musical theatre composer today. Everybody wants to be Sondheim but me. wants to be Sondheim but me. So they try to write a melody that goes somewhere unexpectedly, because they think that's how you get to be like Sondheim. Listen as they hammer out one chord, listen as they hammer it till everybody's bored. That's the way they pray to their lord, Mr. Sondheim. And they pack their lyrics till they're so damn dense, you could put them in the yard and you could use them for a fence. And they honestly believe that they have captured the sense of Sondheim. Well, I want to be Oscar Hammerstein, I want to be Cole Porter. What's wrong with a song that's prettier and clearer and shorter? Everybody wants to be Sondheim but me. Everybody wants to be Sondheim but me. And so they offer no relief from Sturm and Drang and angst and grief, and all their pain is never brief, oh no. Listen as they hammer out one chord, listen till you're ready for a lunatic ward. No wonder Sweeney Todd went out of his gourd, Mr. Sondheim. Where you going? Going bananas. Oh. I want to be Richard Rodgers. I want to be Jerry Herman. So what if I'm writing songs for the ghost of Ethel Merman? She's got rhythm. Everybody wants to be Sondheim today. But I don't want to be Sondheim, no way. I don't want to ride another Sunday in the park. I don't want to ride the next Into the Woods. I admire his style, but his style is his, not mine. And yet, the epidemic can't be curbed. Even Stephen would be disturbed to see what he has spawned universally. 'Cause everybody wants to be Sondheim. Everybody wants to finish the hat. Everybody wants to be Sondheim, but yours truly. Everybody wants to assault your ear. Don't send in the clones, they're already here. Everybody wants to be Sondheim, primed every time to rhyme internally. Everyone's coming up Sondheim but me.
Thank you, Jonathan. And then after 25 years of a very happy and busy career, a miracle happened and I met and married my Peter. Peter was born in Canada, in Montreal. At the age of 18, he left home and went to live in New York and became involved with the left-wing theatre movement there. In 1936, he volunteered for the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, which was part of the international brigades that went and fought in the Spanish Civil War. And there's a very interesting chapter about that in our book. He was badly wounded, and when he went back to New York, he couldn't act anymore, but he made a career as a director and as a teacher. And he was having a meteoric career, especially in television in the early days of CBS, and they were negotiating a Hollywood contract for him when the McCarthy witch hunt struck him, and he was blacklisted and he couldn't work in America anymore. He'd been to Israel during the first year of the state and directed 3 plays which had been very successful, so he packed up and went to live there, and that's where I met him, and that's where we were married, and where I went to live with him for 11 years and left my career behind in England. There's a song I used to love to sing to him because it's exactly how I felt. The sound of applause is delicious. It's a thrill to have the world at your feet. The praise of the crowd is exciting, but I've heard that it's not what makes a world complete. There's one thing you can do for the rest of your life that's worth more than applause, the screaming crowds, the bouquets. Make someone happy. Make just one someone happy. Make just one heart the heart you sing to. One smile that cheers you. One face that lights as it nears you. One man you're everything to. Fame, if you win it, it comes and goes in a minute. Where's the real stuff in life to cling to? Love is the answer. Someone to love is the answer. Once you've found him, build your world around him. Make someone happy. Make just one someone happy. And you will be happy too. Was an immensely gifted man of the theatre, and it was his inspiration that led to a production that had us working together for 8 years. This is what happened. I was living in Israel when a friend phoned a South African director and said, I've got to go next week to South Africa to direct a play based on the life of Golda Meir, and they insist I bring someone from overseas, and I cast an Israeli actress, and I've just heard she's gone into hospital and she can't come. Can you come? I said, how can I go to South Africa next week? He said, I'm bringing the script round now. And Peter said, when he read the script, he says, it's a wonderful part. You can't turn down this chance. So I agreed to go. Golda was still alive and lived not far from us, and it was organised that I would go and meet her. If there hadn't been a security man outside, I would never have known she was anything special, because she lived in a very simple bungalow. She opened the door, she made the tea, and then we sat down to chat. And she said to me, Thelma, I want you to do me a favour. I said, what is it, Mrs. Mayor? She said, I saw this play when it was done on Broadway with Anne Bancroft. And she stooped. She said, I don't stoop. Well, I can see why Anne Bancroft did it, why I might have done it, because we're both quite tall and she was very short. And I said, I promise you, Mrs. Mayor, I won't stoop. But you are giving me a problem. What's that, my dear? I said, well, I don't smoke and you never stop. Oh, don't worry. Just once in a while, light a cigarette, put it straight out in the ashtray and then come back and tell me about it. So off I went, and I did it in Pretoria and Johannesburg. And towards the end of the run in Johannesburg, a man came to my dressing room from the Cape Town Theatre and said, I love this show, I love this production, but I can't, for various reasons, bring it to my theatre at the moment. Could you come back and do it as a one-woman show? I said, well, I don't see how. How do I do it? I said to Moshe Dayan said to me, I went back to Israel, and after a short while, Peter said, you're right about a one-woman show. I think we could adapt it to 2 actors. You, as you do, play Golda from the age of 6 to 76, and we'll change all the other parts into men's parts and have you and a man do a 2-actor version. We got permission from the original author, William Gibson. Amongst Peter's many achievements was he founded the Faculty of the Arts at Tel Aviv University, and he was due for a year's sabbatical. And he had organised that we were to go around the world. First place we came was to England, and I got a job in the Beggar's Opera with Edward Woodward, travelling all around the country. And Peter came with me, we did our adaptation, and before we left we sent it to the Leeds Playhouse, and they said, yes, we'd like to do it. And Peter said, well, will you trust us to have it ready so we don't have to cut our trip short? we could come back just a day or two before the opening. They said, all right. So wherever we were, in airports or on trains or in hotels, we were rehearsing. When we got to Los Angeles, a friend said to me, I could get you a performance. We said, oh, that would be good. So in Los Angeles, we got the costumes and the props. We did 2 performances there and shipped all the stuff back to Leeds to continue with our journey. The next place we were to go was Hawaii, which is many islands, and we were on the little island of Kauai. Somehow, a distant relative heard we were there and insisted we stay with her. When she heard what we were doing, she said, oh, we're starved for theatre on this island. Please, will you do it for us? I said, well, we've got no costumes or props. She said, no, do it like a rehearsal. Please, please. She was a divorcee with a 9-year-old daughter. So the following day, we did it in her daughter's school. In our adaptation, Peter talked directly a lot to the audience. And he said on this occasion, someone either on the front row or near the front he saw was weeping at the beginning. He said he did the whole show to her. And when we got to the end, they were so enthusiastic. Peter said, somebody's trying to tell us something. He said, no more will you use the padding or the wig or the nose and the other things that you had. You'll do it as you did it tonight, always, just with acting. It didn't make sense, really, to try and look like her from the age of 6 to 76. And he said, the other thing is, wherever we go around the world, we'll try and do this play as our contribution to Israel. The next place we were to go was Japan. Peter was very well known in Israel, so he contacted the Israeli ambassador in Tokyo and asked him if he could organize a performance. And he said yes, which he did in the Tokyo synagogue. When we got there, they said, oh, Peter, there's an ex-student of yours been trying to contact you. And when Peter spoke to him, he said, I'm in Kyoto. I'm here on a scholarship, a Japanese Christian sect who are great supporters of Israel. They have a guest house and they'd like you to come and stay with us. So we had the time free. We went down to stay with them. Now, this Japanese Christian sect, the founder had found a passage somewhere in the New Testament that said that Jesus would come to earth again 50 years after the rebirth of Israel, which they took to mean before the end of the millennium. I often wonder what's happened to them now. But in those days, in 1980, it was still possible. So the guest house was in a complex which had a seminary and a church and the house of the founder. We had a lovely time, and Peter, we were the only one staying in the guest house was just a girl to look after us called Miyako. And Peter said, Miyako, we've had such a lovely time, please can we pay you? And she said, no, 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 you're our guest. He said, well, are there enough people in the seminary that speak English that we could do our play for you? She said, oh, yes. I said, there's a little bit of a problem, because when you go indoors in Japan, you have to take your shoes off. And I don't know how to be golden without shoes. And she said, I tell you what you do. We'll do it in the church. When you get to the church, you take your shoes off, put it where you're going to be acting. All the time you're acting, you wear your shoes, then take them off and carry them outside, which is what I did. They have a habit in Japan of letting you know they're listening when you talk to them. And they go, aha, oh, yee, ah, yeah, hey, hee, hee. And they didn't want to disturb Peter by making a noise, but they did all the gestures while he was talking to them. Going, yeah. Oh, I don't think they did that, but that was And they loved it. We went back to the guest house and we'd ordered a taxi for next morning at 7:15 to take us to the station. And Miyako said, could you come down early for breakfast tomorrow? I have a surprise for you. And in the guest house there was a tiny dining room leading into a tiny sitting room. So we came down early, we'd finished breakfast at 7 o'clock, and there was a noise in the next room. I said, Miyako, what's that noise? She said, that's the surprise, come through. We went through into the sitting room, and there were about 30 beautiful young Japanese, and it was their world-famous choir who had come to sing for us, to thank us for doing the play for them. And we sat down to watch, and they started to sing in Hebrew songs about Jerusalem as if they'd just seen a vision. Yerushalayim shel zahav v'shel nechoshet v'shel or alo lakol shiraych ani Kino. For a quarter of an hour, songs in Hebrew about Jerusalem and Israel. Peter and I just sat there and wept. And then they all came to the door and waved us off in the taxi. After Japan, we did it in Helsinki, in Finland, twice. We did it in Oslo, in Norway. And then all over the place for 8 years. 4 times we toured America. But I want to finish by going back to when I first did it. If you remember, that was in South Africa. When I arrived, they were beginning to ease some of the petty apartheid laws. And they just passed a law saying blacks and whites can sit together in the theatre if the local council agrees. We were to open in Pretoria and the local council had refused. And a very astute journalist picked this up, phoned the Israeli ambassador and said, I believe you're going to a gala opening on Monday. If you know this, would you still go? He said, no. And the journalist phoned Golder in Israel, phoned our director. Next day there was a huge headline in his paper, 12 ambassadors refuse invitation to gala opening. I don't think the other 11 had been invited, but never mind. And it caused a scandal, not only in South Africa, in America, here in Israel. It was very difficult for me because they were harassing me and I had a very short time to learn a big part. They were following me down the street, they were contacting me in my flat. There was a girl, a woman in our company who'd been mayoress of Johannesburg and was a great fighter for black rights. And she got up a petition to send back to the Pretoria Council to ask them to reconsider. And this petition went all over South Africa and it was signed by opera singers and ballet dancers and circus performers. One day we all sat on the streets of Pretoria getting passers-by to sign the petition. Some signed it, some pretended to sign it, then picked up the paper and tore it up. And the council did reconsider and they said, no, we cannot allow it because the theatre is in a white residential area. The management I was working for had a tradition that the night before the opening night, they invited their black workers and all their families to see the show. And so the first time I played this part was to an all-black audience. The play is centred in the Yom Kippur War, the 1973 war, which Golda had to run because she was Prime Minister. She never wanted to be Prime Minister. She was a compromise candidate. She was 76 and suffering from lymphatic leukemia. And all through the play, she's agonizing about the boys who are getting killed. She keeps saying, what is the price? What is the price? The play ends with Golda talking directly to the audience. And I'm now going to do it to you, and I'm going to try not to stoop. At this hour, our forces are operating on the west bank of the Suez Canal, inside Egypt. The tide has turned. I can't say more, there's still fighting to be done. Still fighting to be done, is that news? Security? No, we've never had it. All we've ever had is a choice of dangers, and the paradise we promised ourselves, we haven't made it yet. No, this Jewish state doesn't give us security. It gives us something better. Opportunities to be, to hurt, to gamble, lose or win, and to die for something better. 70 years ago, my father, Moshe the carpenter, nailed up planks of wood across the door of our little house in Kiev to keep out a pogrom. I can still hear the hammer. And to come in one lifetime, all the way from the sound of that hammer to life in a state of our own, where we can defend our children and be free and take in every brother in the world who wants to come home. Our lives have been blessed, whatever the price. When this war is over, you won't need me anymore. You'll be wanting younger blood. I don't blame you. I could use some myself. One word more before I go. The best word. Shalom. Shalom. And at that moment, a black boy jumped up and started waving to Golda and called out shalom. And then a woman over there also got up. Then the entire audience stood up, all waving to Golda and shouting, "Shalom, shalom, shalom." And I knew that after this performance, not one of them would be allowed to see this play that had obviously touched them so deeply. And I stood on the stage and I wept. Shalom, shalom, you'll find shalom, the nicest greeting you know. It means bonjour, salut and skål, and twice as much as hello. It means a million lovely things, like peace be yours, welcome home. And even when you say goodbye, you say goodbye with shalom. It's the most amazing word. It can see you through the day. Wait till Berlitz hears of this. You can hardly go wrong. You're bilingual as long as you say shalom. The nicest greeting I know. Shalom. And twice as much as hello. It means a million lovely things, like peace be yours, welcome home. And even when you say goodbye, if your voice has "I don't want to go" in it, say goodbye with a little hello in it, and say goodbye with shalom. Wonderful. You were wonderful. Was I on key or was it? Really? There was one thing I could
I think I didn't give you the note very clearly.
How